Hello, Patriots. This is Kelly Jackson of the Tennessee Conservative, Tennessee's #1 conservative news alternative. Today, I am absolutely 100% blessed to have with me Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District out there in Knoxville. Thank you so much for being with me today, Congressman Burchett. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's just Burchett. I'm not when
Burchett.
you get
Okay.
yes, man. When Tony Dorsett won the Heisman, he became Tony Dorsett, and I have not won the Heisman. It's just Burchett.
Okay. Congressman Burchett, thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
So today I wanted to ask you a few questions about a few things, and I'm going to start with the topic of energy. And you recently questioned Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm on, what her department is doing in terms of different forms of energy. And I thought, there were a couple of items in that conversation that were worth digging into a little deeper, especially since she had to be hauled before the committee versus just showing up voluntarily.
Yes,
Um,
ma'am.
a little backstory first, though. We've been here since 2016, and we were happy to be here because the energy prices here in Tennessee, compared to where we were living out west, are just much more affordable, and which we were blessed to have that. What we did notice, though, about 2021, the TVA seemed to be consistently underestimating the power demand that we have needed. And we have had more power outages in the last 3 years than in all of the years we've been here combined. The freeze for 2 days before Christmas was a special treat for us because I had a house full of family, and the only thing keeping us warm for 2 days was my gas stove.
Yes, ma'am.
So, with all that said, you asked Secretary Granholm about more reactors, and she indicated that we're getting closer. For those that don't know, we do have the 4 power plants, Sequoia 1 and 2 and Watts Bar 1 and 2. You indicated that Tennessee is a nuclear powerhouse. So, and I think it supplies about 45% of the electricity in our state. It just seems as time passes, the federal government is pushing Americans closer and closer to a lifestyle that they can just shut down with the flip of a switch. So, what is being done at the congressional level to mitigate this push for control over our energy?
Well, unfortunately, not a whole lot. Both parties are corrupt, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I expect the Democrats to be a bunch of godless communists. I would kind of hope our party would steer away from that, but we, the K Street lobbyists and the war pimps at the Pentagon and otherwise have a lot of control over us. We've talked. I can remember about 8 years ago, they said, in about 8 years, we're going to have these small modular reactors, and that would provide a lot more energy, safer, not so much centralized. And here it is, 8 years later, and they're saying, about 8 to 10 more years, we're going to get those dadgum things, and so it's just crazy the amount of regulation. I understand it needs to be safe, but you have bureaucrats on top of bureaucrats, and it's just ridiculous. And we are, I think, people are getting frustrated with it, as they should. We've this administration has put people on the TVA board that are pushing us away from carbon-based fuels or that's in the ground. I think God put them there and for us to use, and that gun we ought to use them. Natural gas, oil, things like that, coal, are not according to our colleges and higher learning institutions, but according to real science, our air is a lot more cleaner than it was in the 70s. I always give the story about driving by Robert Shaw every Sunday morning, going to church with my mom and dad in our VW Beetle, no seat belts. Dad was probably smoking his pipe, and when we'd have to roll the windows up because they were making plexiglass, and it would literally make your eyes burn and your nose run. And if they were doing that today, they would go to jail, and they should. But our air is cleaner, our water's cleaner, and we are in so much better shape. But fast forward to now, we have people on the board that are just, if they're not compromised by our enemies, they sure act like they are, because they're pushing us further and further away from getting what we have in the ground, what we have here, and purchasing it from our enemies. And throw in a bunch of gutless politicians who are in bed, literally or figuratively, with lobbyists. And you have the environmental community, which I feel like in some instances has been infiltrated. If you remember, during the Clinton administration, the Obama administration, and probably during some of the Bush administration, areas would get, we'd say, oh, there's a huge coal reserve there. And then all of a sudden they would turn it into a national park. Those types of things would happen, and our national media would just kind of brush over it because they're in bed with those folks. They helped them get there. They are part of their leadership is part of the deep state. And so we are, and here we are, we're needing energy, coldest day of the year. We pay the head man at TVA over $8 million a year plus bonuses.
Yep.
Remember President Trump told me in the White House, he said, Tim, you do that job for $8 million a year, wouldn't you, buddy? And I said, yes, sir, Mr. President, 1 year. And then I said, no, you better make that 2. You don't know my wife and daughter. And he laughed. The whole room erupted. But the truth was he got it. And he knows that TVA and these other organizations, I'm a big fan of privatization. It scares people.
Yeah.
But I think we need to start moving towards those models. We are capitalists in this country. And there's going to be some government oversight, but I think we'd be better served now, especially with the nuclear energy coming on, to get away from this model we have of we've got a federal organization like TVA that will remind us. They remind us quite often that they are they're a quasi-governmental entity until they need government assistance, just like the post office. And then what do? We write them a big fat check. And then they tell us to go mind their own business. And there's a real arrogance on TVA's part, whether they're coming on your land, spraying unnecessarily, or just any of this other, or the responses they're giving. They go into executive session, so we can't cover it under sunshine type situations. So, I've had a running battle with TVA. It's no secret. I'm not a fan of their leadership model. I think you could pay somebody $1 million a year, and they would gladly run TVA.
Yes. That was, first of all, that was an amazing impression of President Trump. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
But
I'm proud of that.
But yes, I absolutely agree. In fact, I think it wasn't until that freeze a couple of years ago that I looked into, who the TVA is, what their makeup is, and then noticed, I think it was 6 members of that board were replaced when the Biden administration came in. So, do you think that there would be maybe possibly an effort to privatize that if President Trump is reelected in the fall?
I think there could be, but nobody really has the guts to pull the trigger. Let's be honest. I can, in recent memory, I can remember some Tennessee senators who talked about that on the campaign trail. But once they got in, it's sort of like term limits. Yes. Everybody's for them till they get elected, and then they think, hey, we need to study this for a few years.
Yeah, exactly.
And the big boys whisper in their ear. They don't want it. They want their cheap energy, which is subsidized. It's not cheap. It costs somebody something.
Yes, sir.
And they want to continue on this path of them being the kingmakers and things like that. What you'd have to do is you'd have to have a succession of presidents who believe in privatization and would put people on that board that would agree to that.
Yeah.
So until they do that, I don't see it happening. But the president can remove board members, as he did while I was sitting there with him.
Wow.
And the vice president. It was kind of history making. I was surprised none of the other Tennessee legislators showed up because TVA has they'll tell you they don't have lobbyists, but they've got people in the community that that just that bow and scrape to the Chamber of Commerce. And that will call you to the woodshed, and they don't want that call.
Yeah. Yes or no. I am eyeball deep in grassroots here in Middle Tennessee, And I
Yes, ma'am.
concur with that assessment 1,000%. So the Chamber of Commerce is the head of the snake, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
well, you remember the National Chamber of Commerce um, endorsed, I believe, 14 or so of Nancy Pelosi's lieutenants
mhm,
over Republicans or conservatives or moderates even.
yeah,
And then, that's why we really have no border control.
yeah,
It's because the Chamber of Commerce wants somebody on your roof that doesn't speak English when they fall off is not going to sue them because they're afraid of being deported, and they'll just be sent to the emergency room where us peasant taxpayers pick up that tab for that
yeah,
person by higher fees. The millionaires, it's not good.
yeah,
It's pennies on the dollar for them, but for us, it's a bad thing, and we've got to get. And I've been calling them out regularly, as you well know, but
yes,
it's but that's few and far between
yeah,
with other
yeah,
members of Congress.
yeah,
And I really just don't care. Let them come. They've been coming after me my whole political life, ma'am. And
yes,
I'm
sir.
I'm telling you, we've got we have people that we've we've got a good one over here in Blount County. They brought in Smith and Wesson and some others, but
Yes,
some of these folks, they're not from your area.
yeah,
And they've got this education, and there's an arrogance. The Bible talks about
yes,
professing yourself to be wise, you became a fool.
yes,
And that's sort of what we're at right now.
yes, I agree 100%. So also in that conversation with Secretary Granholm, you mentioned the UAPs present at the reactor sites, and she
Yeah.
seemed to try to push that off like it's some kind of conspiracy theory, but there is discussion out there that these UAPs are powered by a source of energy that the government has access to but won't release as open source. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that, if you have any?
I've got a lot of thoughts on that, man. Um, and they tried to use it against me a lot.
Yes.
We've got a Pentagon that has never passed an audit,
Hmm.
and we reward them with 20 to 40 billion new dollars every time they turn around. And
Yes.
there's a real arrogance there. And you see people in both parties invested heavily in missile defense systems that we just happen to be exporting to Ukraine right now.
Mhm.
And so, where does that leave us? All I want is transparency. I
Yeah.
just want somebody to come out and say, hey, we've got this is going on, and tell us what's going on. It's our tax dollars. We should know. It's not about little green. I mean, ultimately, it is, about flying saucers and what have and the inhabitants
Right.
of those. But we have a right to know. And when I sit in a meeting with a pilot, one of the best in the world, that tells me, Tim, this thing was 14 feet from my cockpit. And then I have some little punk in a man bun,
Yeah.
30 years old, telling me, laughing at me in a classified briefing, saying that I don't know what I'm talking about. And then when he's asked, well, what about the data
Yeah.
collected from the planes that you're sitting here telling us didn't exist? And he
Right.
said, oh, I haven't seen that data. This is what we're at. And then they send these clowns after me on election day, oh,
Mhm.
Burchett, he's, what's next, Burchett? And here's the model they want for all that. Believe it or not, it is the same model that for the Kennedy assassination files. Man, that happened over 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And we know about as much as we know from that
Yes.
day. And
Yes.
they will not release anything. And
Mhm.
they say they don't exist, yet they release files that have been heavily redacted. It looks like somebody shot them with a 12 gauge shotgun.
Yes.
And I'm not turning loose of it. And there's more and more members. I mean, it's across the aisle. AOC,
Yeah.
she's with me on the disclosure,
That's good.
and Jared Moskowitz out of Florida.
Yeah.
So it's a lot going on with that, but it's and you're right. She was just being, and if you saw what happened,
Yeah.
my friend on there, Anna Polina Luna,
Yeah.
she's pretty smart.
He
I
is.
actually set the commissioner up.
Hmm.
I teed her up, and then when she said she didn't know what you're talking about, that didn't exist. Luna had we'd already, that was sort of our plan.
Right.
Whoever called on first, and then whoever got on second
Yeah.
delivered the blow, and she did. And people were saying, "Well, you should ask questions like Luna did. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Dude, no, I'm playing chess with these clowns. This checkers is over." And
Yes.
so, yeah, and she she was very arrogant, and she
Mhm.
didn't know it either. I said, I tweeted that day, I said, she's either very arrogant or lying. And I think it's a
Oh, yeah.
combination of the two.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And we've had documented cases where the nuclear facilities had literally just shut down. And,
Wow.
and so,
So does that, the
yeah,
presence of these things, it causes that to happen? Is that what happened?
I don't know. I don't know. And they're not crashing like they did. Partly because we use a different type. I think it's because we use a different type of sonar.
Okay.
And I think that's why you see after the 40s, you saw a different, it's changed a whole lot. Roswell's the one everybody talks about,
Right.
but there's been there's one maybe a few before, but there's one afterwards that not really talked about. And there's been other occurrences. And I'm a Christian. I'm a born again Christian. Jesus
Right.
died on the cross for my sins.
Yes.
But and this doesn't scare me one bit about my religious beliefs. I believe that in the beginning, Genesis 1, the heavens and the earth, and in Ezekiel, if you read the first chapter of Ezekiel, that's some pretty odd stuff for them to talk about a wheel within a wheel that's flying above them. And if it's a conspiracy to lie to Tim Burchett, they've contacted tens of thousands of people, because
Yeah.
I'm telling you, overseas, I'm on a podcast. I could be on a podcast every day. I think I just don't have the
Yeah.
time to do it. And in
Yeah.
England, it's a big deal, and
Yes.
Central America, and every organized religion has something like this. And if you go into the pyramids, there's hieroglyphics that
Yeah.
pretty convincing.
Yeah.
And
And I,
that was back before Al Gore invented the internet. So people wouldn't be able to talk to each other.
yes, yes. I mean, I think the consensus among some of my people is that it's a combination of intrigue in that the government obviously has something that they don't want us to be privy to, and when you combine that with what we know, we're dealing with spiritual forces all the time. So I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
it's a combination of the two. And these things, if people are seeing anything, I really believe it's spiritual in nature versus,
I, I, there's a
physical.
lot of talk about that interdimensional
Yeah.
and other things, but I wish you and your followers here could see all the things that I've been privileged to, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, boy. I can tell you we concur with that. We concur. Let me move on to, let me flip on over to voter integrity. So I had a question from a good friend of mine who is sort of the champion of voter integrity here in Tennessee. And
Right.
she was wondering about Congressman Roy's SAVE Act. And I was looking at it, and it looks like the only member of our Tennessee delegation that signed on to that is Representative Harshbarger. So, what about the bill has caused you to, to decide that you weren't going to sign on to it? Are there any amendments that could cause you to reconsider that, or have you signed on to it? And I just don't have that information.
Well, I tell you, signing on to something, it's just they come to you on the floor and say, "Hey, Burchett, you got to look at this thing. There's thousands of bills," and I get people all the time say, "Well, you didn't sign on the
Yeah,
slow boat to China bill. I thought you were for slow boats to China,
yeah,
And I don't know. I'll talk. Since you brought it up, I'll talk to Chip. He's a good buddy of mine, and I'll see about it. I'm if it's about voter integrity, I'm sure I won't have any problem with it.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
But a lot
essentially,
of those, a lot of times though, you got to realize thousands of bills. We
yeah,
have 20 or
yeah,
30 committees. And a lot of times they don't even ask you to sign on unless you're on that committee that would
yes.
hear it.
Okay.
So, and I don't
Yeah,
serve on any committees, Diane, and but we're friends. Our
yeah,
districts butt up to each other.
right.
So I'll be glad to look into it.
Yeah, it seems common sense obtaining proof of citizenship and then removing non-citizens from the voter roll.
Right.
So, I mean,
As I say a lot of times when somebody says they have an idea about something with common sense, I always say, "Ma'am, you have no you should never serve in Congress. We do not honor common sense here.
Yeah. Well, I will say when I reviewed the list, there are a few on there that I'm not a huge fan of. So it does kind of make me go, when those characters sign on to something, I sort of am a little bit more suspect of it
A
than
lot of, you got to realize it's an election year too. People
yes,
sign
sir.
on to stuff
Yeah.
because they know it's not going to go anywhere, and dadgummit, they play that game. And
Yes.
election year, they run home to our Lincoln Day and Reagan Day dinners and
Yes.
throw the red meat out. Nancy Pelosi, she's earning 40% on her stock market tips, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, you got one Democrat was making over 300%. Nancy's not even I don't think she's in the top 50, or maybe in the top 50. But as I like to say, my buddy Tommy Siler, he manages my $7,000 portfolio for me. So my mutual fund
Woo, big,
that
big
I have. Yes, man. My daughter's gonna have to. I don't know if she better go to get a scholarship to welding school, because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to
Well,
train
I'll
her in
tell
these
you
courses.
what, the future is in the trades.
I know.
So
My degree is technological and build education.
yeah,
Matter of fact, to do it all over again, I'd be a welder. I like to weld, and I
yeah,
can run a machine shop and things like
yeah.
that. So
Yeah. I
that's
have
kind of
three
thing.
teenagers. I'm pushing one of them into something more trade oriented, just because we need people to fix stuff. We're going to run out of
Yes,
people to fix stuff.
there's always going to be. As I always say, you cannot deport a clogged toilet to Mexico.
This is true. This is true. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have a big election coming our way, obviously, with the presidential election. I can't believe we've actually made it through 4 years from, inauguration day in 2021. Thank God the time has seemed to go by somewhat quickly, but only I think because we've all been so preoccupied with trying to conserve what we can conserve. Um,
Sure.
but what do you see for at least the hold on Congress, and what do you think are our chances for retaking the Senate?
I think um, we have a good shot at all three. But the problem is a lot of yours and my people that we probably even confide in. 20 million so-called evangelical Christians decided to stay home.
Yeah.
We have got to put enough points on the board, ma'am, so they can't steal this next election.
Yes, sir.
We and that's what's got to happen. And we've got to play it smart. We didn't play it smart last time. We should have had pre-filed lawsuits ready instead of a bunch of TV personalities running to the cameras. We should have been ready for the fight, because this one's for everything. This is the deep state, the people that control the CIA, the FBI, the IRS, all these things. And I think President Trump understands it. At least we had conversations that he is, I believe, said to me that in fact we need to fix these things. And I encouraged him. I said, you're great at telling us what's wrong, because we're seeing it every day. But you're better at telling us how to fix these things, and that's what we need.
Yeah.
We need to fix these things. America is in a free fall, and frankly, and I get it. Trump's. I mean, you look at your Bible, King David.
Yes.
I mean, King David's kind of a dirtbag. Well, he was a dirtbag. He slept with Bathsheba, his best friend, the general. And then you had him killed.
Yes.
Ran him into battle and then pulled everybody out around him, got him killed.
Yeah.
But God had favor upon him, and I can't tell you why I feel that for some reason God still has favor on this country.
Yes.
But we've turned our back on so many instances, and I'll tell you this: I prayed with President Trump one time in New Jersey at his country club there. It was me and him and one other congressman in the room, and the security was there, but you just get used to that stuff. And I prayed with him, and then after it was over with, he looked at me and he says, "Tim, is this what this is all about to you?" And he went like this, obviously, what I'm doing. I said, yes, sir, Mr. President, it is.
Yeah.
And I prayed for his safety and his family's safety and his well-being. And I felt like, I mean, I'm in politics. I've been in it my whole life, man. It's just con game, liars convention. But I felt at that point, President Trump, I felt like something was cracking that hard Yankee
No.
exterior. And now I would encourage people to pray for President Trump, pray
Yes,
for his
sir.
salvation, pray. I don't like these pictures that show, him holding hands with Jesus or something.
Oh,
I
God,
mean,
no.
that ain't Trump. That's not Trump. I mean,
No, no,
I don't want him teaching down here at First Baptist, my Sunday school
no.
class.
That is
I
not why
believe
we
this
are
president.
electing him.
And let me give you, I know I don't want to run out of time, but can
No,
I
no,
give
no,
you
you're
one quick
fine.
example?
Sure.
Okay. We've had leaders in the past in our party, which I'm pointing to, they call the UN to get permission to go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
Can we use 2-ply or single-ply toilet paper almost?
Ruth,
But you
yes.
remember this guy Soleimani? He was a
Yes,
terrorist. He was a
I
bad
do.
guy.
Yes.
And I talked to people in intelligence that had tracked him for quite some time. And he murdered and tortured, and he was just a horrible, despicable
Yes.
human.
Yes.
Well, Trump had him taken out, and
Yep.
he didn't take him out at the airport when he could have got him coming off the plane. He couldn't, in a crowd of people. He got him on an interstate, and they probably had a spotter on the ground, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably some 28-year-old second lieutenant in Las Vegas, Nevada, flying a drone. But
Yep.
I don't know that for a fact, but I don't know that as either, and I'll leave it at that. But the way they identified Soleimani was his ring finger, because that was about
Really?
all that was left. Yes, ma'am. They had this ring on it. It was a specific design, and you see his charred remains over there. It could have been him. It could have been anybody, the man on the moon, and then you see his shin bone leaning up against a guardrail, things like that. And the reason I tell you all this is because he didn't check with the United Nations.
Right.
He didn't call and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. He just did it.
He just did it.
And that's one other quick story. He was having the most delicious chocolate cake ever down at Mar-a-Lago with Xi Jinping, the head guy of China.
Chinese.
He's pretty ruthless cat. He's pretty ruthless cat himself, but
yes, he is.
Trump was a cowboy, and he is a cowboy. He doesn't, and he's unpredictable, and I dig that about him. But he apparently, here's when they come in to tell the president something, they don't just announce it or anything. They don't send it by osmosis. Some staff will walk in and whisper something in his ear, and maybe his chief of staff, somebody else comes in, and they're in there eating, and the guy whispers into his ear, and Trump puts his fork down and looks over at Xi Jinping and says, we just sent, I forget how many, I think it was Syria, maybe 90 cruise missiles over there. Xi Jinping puts his fork down and says, they shouldn't have been gassing kids. Picks up his fork, and they just continue. And that was all that was said.
Wow.
That's the kind of leader we need. We don't, and I don't know if that's accurate or not. Some pretty informed people told me that, but I wouldn't put it past him. And that's the kind of person we need.
Yes.
He makes decisions. When he moved the embassy in Israel.
Yes.
You get a lot of people mad. Now it's going to cause World War III. Nothing happened. Not a shot fired.
Right.
And Gaza didn't happen.
Nope.
Russia didn't move into Ukraine. North Korea wasn't shooting up a bunch of crazy missiles.
Yeah.
Just look across the board. And here we are. We're on both sides. We borrow money from China to give to Taiwan to protect them against China.
Yeah.
We
makes no sense.
at the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's horrible. Putin's a thug.
Yeah.
I wish he was eliminated, but the problem with eliminating somebody like that, you don't know who's behind him.
Right. When you leave a vacuum too for somebody else. Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. And so you got a lot of things like that going on, but Trump understood that, and he had a good gut, and so. I felt like we're on the cusp with this bunch now. This guy can't even find he can't pour water out of a boot even if the instructions are written on the heel. And I've had conversations with him. It's not even a Saturday Night Live skit. It is beyond belief. And And so, who's pulling the strings? That's what you
Yeah.
got to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And
think
right
that,
now, he's so incoherent
yes.
that I'm afraid they're going to put somebody else in there,
Yeah.
like the governor of California or
Yeah.
whoever. So I don't know. I tweeted about the other day. I thought it would be the governor of California, and then Roger Stone got on there and said no. In fact, he thinks it's going to be Hillary. I mean, not Hillary, but Michelle Obama.
You
And so
know, yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that they can't replace him at this point as well. Like Larry Elder, who's a black conservative, he says I pay attention to a lot of the black media, and to replace him with a white man would be such an affront to a huge voter base that they have, which are black women. To
yeah,
over to go over to gloss over Kamala Harris would be such an insult to them. They might lose them as a voter base. So I hope the Obamas feel like they're just having too much fun out in Hollywood and they don't want to come back to the White House, and she decides not to do it.
yeah.
But then, the Democrat convention of what was it, 68 happened. So they have super delegates. So, I mean, who knows?
It's not it's
Yeah.
and you got to realize it's very Clinton-esque.
Yes.
They don't care who they hurt,
Yes. Agreed.
and they don't care for the pilot. They don't care. They just
Yes.
want to win. It's that vicious power,
Yeah.
and it's their own fault. But then
Yeah.
again, if we put a bunch of moderate Republicans in that just sell us down the river on this debt thing and just
Yeah.
keep playing, undermining everything we do all over the world because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Washington D.C. is, it's called a swamp,
yeah.
but a swamp's a pretty cool thing, man. God created a swamp, and it's it's a cool little ecosystem.
Yeah.
Washington D.C. is just an open sewer. It just flows in, and nothing but contamination and
Yeah.
putrid grossness flows out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, finally, I would be remiss if I let you go and I didn't ask you about a run for governor in 26. Are there any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, man. We just ran through a tunnel. We're breaking up. I get that. I get that a lot. And I've thought about it. I'll pray about it.
Yes, sir.
I just say no right now, but I won't put an H in front of that no.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that want to run for governor. I spent 16 years in the legislature, and honestly, I think I could do a good job.
Yes.
But we can talk about it. We can talk about it. I'll listen to you.
Yeah.
I don't know what it costs to board a horse in Davidson County. I wonder if I could just let the horses run on the grounds of the governor's mansion. But I think I could do a good job. I understand
Yeah.
state government. As I said, 4 years in the House, 12 in the Senate. I've got friends in all 95 counties.
Yes.
But it's a very expensive venture, and a lot of people hate my guts that are power brokers.
But that's good though. Based on what I know,
I know it's good. I know it's good.
I've spent enough time up at Cordell Hull. That's a good thing if they hate your guts. So
yes, ma'am. I got you. I've spent a lot of time over there too, as you know.
Yes.
Well, we can talk about it, but thank you. I'm honored that you would think about it.
Oh,
but ultimately it'd be how that would affect my beautiful wife and my daughter.
Of course.
That's my number one concern right now. A dear friend of mine, a preacher, Pastor Sexton, who passed away, he'd always tell me, he said, Tim, take care of that family. Nothing more important. I'd say, yes, Pastor, you're right. And I know he's right. And but that's my concern.
Yeah, 100%. That's where your priorities should definitely be. So, and we're thrilled where you're at now. And we love the fact that you stand up so boldly for the state of Tennessee, and you are just a stalwart defender of all of the things in our state, about our state, that we love. And so many people, I have to say, so many people coming here because they believe in it too. They believe in all of the things that make Tennessee such an amazing state to live in. So I just appreciate you, and I appreciate your representation for us up there in that sewer. So
Yes,
I
well,
appreciate
if
it.
y'all want me to run for something, just you need to make sure a lot of these groups call my office and get me out to speak. I'll travel to speak. I don't mind. We go all over the
Okay.
place. I drive and I'll drive home and we're
Good,
good.
good to know. Good to know.
As
I'll
long as
make
those
sure.
as long as those Ukrainian hit squads don't get me, apparently I'm on their list.
Well, we'll make sure to hire extra security. So
I carry my own security most of the time, ma'am. But thank you. I'll take it. You're
yeah,
welcome. You're
yeah.
very kind.
Well, again, thank you so much for being with us today, Congressman Burchett. And this has just been such a great opportunity and time getting to talk with you on behalf of Tennesseans. Please, please come back and see us again anytime.
You just call me, ma'am, and I'll be glad to. I love this show, and y'all are great, and
Thank you.
got great supporters, and
Yes.
we are blessed beyond belief to live in Tennessee. I can have the best day of my life in Washington D.C., but when they
Yep.
bang that gavel, I'm heading to the airport because
Yeah.
I'm going to get home.
You bet. You bet. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Congressman, and you have an amazing day, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.